Hey guys, welcome to Happy Homelands. It's so good to be here with you. If you're looking like, where are you, Ramsey Paul? I am in Fayetteville. As you know, Sasha's in the process of moving into my home and we're packing up. That's why we have boxes back there. And to add to the mess, we had a snowstorm, and in the middle of the snowstorm, my car decided to break down. And the good news is, good news, bad news, is the engine's fine. It's the ECM. That's like the computer that controls everything in your engine because everything now is computerized. So that went on the fritch, and that controls like the fuel injection. So they have to order that part from Subaru. It's an expensive part too, and get that in. So right now, I don't know. I'm still looking maybe to get a new car just because I drive cars forever. That's how I do it. I get a car and then I just, drive it for 20 years. So it's time for a new one. So this is where I am. And Alicia, how you doing? It's great to see you.
Hi, great to see you. I'm unfortunately a little bit sick tonight, but other than that, I'm good. We had snow too, and it was really fun to get out there and just play.
Yeah, it was. I wish it was more fun for us. We actually, Sasha, she has my little Toyota. She went to pick me up. I live down this dirt road, and then the car got stuck the other day. So it was like I
No.
know we got out, but it was hilarious. It's too bad it wasn't on video because she's like, "You're gonna drive
Oh,
over the cliff," because there's like a little edge. I'm like, "I'm okay. We're trying to get
oh,
this." So
no, that's terrifying. Oh, I
yeah,
couldn't do that.
I know it was fun. And then I got a scratch on my face, guys. If you're wondering what happened, it was like, oh, did Sasha knife you? No, the weirdest thing happened, right? I'm old, so I get tired, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take my dog Button. It's a little dog I
Oh,
inherited from
nice.
Sasha's father passed away, and we got his dog. So I got the dog. I love it. And I was upstairs taking a nap with the dog laying next to me. And the dog is scared to death of the cats. And this cat named Buddy jumped on the bed. And the dog literally went, screamed, and jumped up and landed right on my face with his claws. So it's like, oh, great.
Oh, oh, that's
So,
cool.
yeah, I haven't even told Sasha that. She's probably listening. So, Sasha, yeah, Button scratched my face up because she flipped out. I never heard, I mean, this dog is she acts so tough, like when she sees animals on TV, but she's just so scared in real life with everything. So I think she got hit by one of the cats early on, so now she's always just frightened of these cats. It's really pathetic dog, but she's a sweetie. So
She sounds sweet. Don't call her pathetic.
oh, it is. It's she's pathetic, but in a good way. She's just a little thing. So yeah. So that's what we're doing. You were talking about getting a big dog, right? You're going to get a big one.
Yes. So I grew up with dogs and we haven't gotten one because we've been just moving around all
Yeah,
over
that's
the
hard. Yeah,
world
yeah.
and we're finally, settled in a place. And so we're thinking about getting a bull mastiff and they're not related
Wow.
to pit bulls or anything like that. They are this breed that like originated a long time ago with the mastiffs. Like they were the original war dogs that the Romans
Yes.
actually used. Yep. And
Yes.
then the British actually adapted them to guard their estates in their game. And so if like somebody was trying to poach on their land, they would send the bull mastiff after it. So I just, they're actually given that background, they're actually very safe and they're very loyal and they actually are kind of like a medium energy dog. So they don't require a lot of maintenance. And we're really excited to hopefully get one, this spring or fall. We'll see.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, big dogs are fun, but they
Mhm.
eat a lot and do other things a lot. But yeah.
They do, but we have a huge backyard and we also already have a cat. So we're
Hmm.
used to it.
Yeah, if you get it when it's a puppy, you'll get used to the cat. So you should be
Yeah.
fine. You'll
Yeah.
chase the cat. Well, guys, thank you for being here with us tonight. We're still kind of adjusting the show because I don't want it to be just like the Ramsey Paul show where I talk just necessarily news. So if you guys like it, one of the ways you can show your like of this type of show is to help give questions and through super chats on YouTube. Rumble has rants, and we're happy to answer them. And then there's Power Chats here. And you can send power chats whenever you want. And Stream Elements, they have a link feature. I got that up. So, but if you have questions or comments, please send them in. And just so
I
you
think,
know, we split all the money 50-50 on this. So, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think it'd be really fun to actually hear from people for tonight's discussion. Like you and I
Yes.
are talking about like our ideas. Like I really want to hear what our audience thinks about this subject too, because I think it's
Uh,
really exciting.
it is because so what I was thinking, I'm like, well, what can we talk about tonight? And I kind of what spurred it on, and I think I put it in the title is we're having a change, right? Trump gets inaugurated next week. So it's always a new beginning, a little bit. But I thought, well, what if we're just starting from a kind of a blank slate? How would you structure a society? I guess there's a couple of ways you can look at it. Your utopia, but then there's realistic, right? There's realism. People aren't perfect. Until you're in heaven, everything's not going to be perfect. We're always going to have criminals. But how do you deal with that in your ideal society? And I think we need as a community to kind of step back and really talk about what our ideal is. What do we look at? And so I put together some topics, and Alicia and I are just going to talk over. And yeah, I definitely would like your input, what you guys think about this. And I wrote down a list of stuff I sent Alicia, but Alicia, you can bring up other stuff if I forgot it. This is just some talking points. And I will just start off because immigration is such a huge issue right now. And I think a country should be for the people. It shouldn't be for the entire world. For example, Germany should be for the German people, England for the English, Japan, where you used to live, should be for the Japanese. Now, I don't believe in like 100% purity or any of that. I think that's just unrealistic. But you always should strive to keep the super majority of your country for your people, and your immigration policy should reflect that. And immigration should always, number one, not be based on are they going to help with the economy, but do they really fit in with your culture? And it should be done in a very measured way where people have a chance to assimilate. So you just don't want like tens of millions of, let's say, Indians coming. What happened in Canada? It's just destroying their nation. It's changing their entire culture. Nothing wrong with Indians. They have India, and I'm not saying there can't be Indians in Canada or United States, but we don't have the obligation to take in everyone. We couldn't even function as a society. This is what a country is borders. If you don't have borders, you don't have a country. So if I was starting ideally a country, I would be very selective who I let in, and I would base it based on how much close they are aligned to us with our ethnic background. Do they speak English? Are they basically a Christian background because we were founded as a Christian nation? Because the more of these things they check in common with us, the more likely they're going to be successfully be able to assimilate to be one of us. But again, we don't need millions of people. We can bring up our own birth rates. So I'm not against that. Now, in the current situation, I would just do a total freeze on immigration. We're full right now. But long term, I would allow it, but it would be very, very minimal. We shouldn't be bringing in millions of people. I'm talking maybe a year, no more than 100,000 people. That's sort of my ideal. What are your thoughts, Alicia, about immigration?
No, I completely agree with you. New Zealand is a good example of what you're talking about. I think even New Zealand has it did have one of the strictest immigration policies in the world. You're not even allowed to immigrate to New Zealand unless you're unless you're within a certain economic bracket. And I think that's very valuable as well. I think that's something that we need to look at as a country. I agree. Like if we were to create a utopia tomorrow, we deport all the illegals, we look at deporting the dreamers, and we certainly look at people that don't have that Christian background, because as we've observed with these recent terrorist attacks and with the terrorist attacks in the past, they have been Muslim. A vast majority of them have been. And so I'm in agreement with you. I think that we need to be even more strict with immigration going forward.
Yeah, I mean, even if I know most Muslims are probably good people, and I have no doubt about that, but they have their own countries. They don't need to be in our homeland because we have a different way of looking at the world. I once knew a girl in Europe, and she brought that up that different nationalities, they have a different like spirit about them, how they look at the world. For example, Russians look at the world different than Germans. They're very different people, and that's okay. It's not one's better or worse. And we as Americans, we were founded primarily by, well, really English. That's why are speaking English right now, with a Christian background, and we had a certain philosophy that led to the Constitution. It's the people that created the Constitution. It wasn't the Constitution that created the people. And I think that's how we really need to talk about it. So while economics is important, and yeah, it's good to get smart people in, that's not necessarily bad. And if they're law abiding, but that's not enough. Even if they're smart and they're law abiding, but they're not compatible with our culture, they really don't be here. They don't belong here. And again, I wish them well in their country. I don't want to bother them, and I hope they can be very prosperous. But we have a right to our homeland just like everyone else does. Just like Israel, I always bring that up. People get tired of me bringing that up, but they're a Jewish state. They can't allow everyone in, because if they allowed everyone in, they would be outvoted. It would no longer be a Jewish state. And that makes sense to me. And I think we have the same right. So that'd be my immigration policy. So it sounds like we're pretty close in agreement with
Yeah,
that.
and just to add to one more thing is that this isn't some crazy far right extremist idea. This has actually been proven in psychological studies and sociology over, and these are very long term studies. They've shown that when a society is extremely diverse, the trust among the people actually goes down. People are less likely to vote, they're less likely to donate, they're less likely to take care of their neighbor, they're less likely to exercise and go outside, and they're actually more likely to sit inside, lead a sedentary lifestyle, and watch TV. And this is in, again, this like multi-year study that this sociologist did, and he was of course poo-pooed by everybody else in academia. But the fact remains that homogenous societies tend to be healthier for the people that are living in them.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And again, and I always take the argument, oh, but you'll miss out on all the exciting foods. I'm like, oh, there's something called recipes. you know, uh, White people can make burritos too. It's just not, you don't have to have it be a certain ethnic group. So I always thought that was kind of a stupid reason to bring people in. And Louis Barrow, thank you. We got a power chat. Thank you. There's a link below. I saw that in the Congo, there was mass execution of gang members involved in violent crimes, and they were executed the next day, not on death row for 20 years. They were granted time to pray before they got the axe. Luz, this is kind of good. Well, maybe a good segue talking about our judicial system and how, in my ideal society, it would work. I kind of have a radical idea on this. I believe in a justice system where there's basically three different types of penalties you can get. They're either restitution, you pay a fine, or you help the person, so if you injure them, you pay them. Uh, Prison time, but I want to have prison sentences ever over 5 years, and then the death penalty. And then there'll be a phase where you're determined if you're guilty or innocent. There's a court within 30 days, a jury of the peers. And then if you're found guilty, then there's the sentencing phase, and that's based, again, the jury, they can recommend a certain penalty based on the crime you did, and also take into consideration if you've been a repeat offender. And many times, if you just constantly, let's say, are mugging people, I'm okay with you being executed. I don't think we need to keep you around for 20 years in prison. I don't think prison's expensive. It's kind of cruel. And we don't need people around that can't get with the program. And I'm not, everyone, I'm for actually trying to rehabilitate people. But the sad truth is, and I found this out when I did jury duty, I was talking to people in the court. You see these people in orange with chains walking around. And one of the guys there said, at work there, said, we see the same people every week. Every week, the same people who are getting arrested. And so what it is, it's a very small group of people that do crimes over and over and over. It's very rare, like we see some story in New York City, a guy, let's say, pushes someone in front of the subway. It's very rare that person has just been clean his whole life. It's usually that's a arrest record a mile long. I don't think we need to have to tolerate those people. And again, when they first do the crime, I would they have to pay a financial penalty, maybe go to jail for a year or two, and then they'd be talked to there. And I don't think jail should be cruel, but if they can't get over it, then I'm fine with them being executed. And I agree that punishment has to happen quickly, because a lot of these people, they don't have a long-term outlook anyway. So to say we're going to execute you 20 years from now, they can't conceive of that anyway. It doesn't mean anything for them. So that's how I would devise my justice system. What are your thoughts, Alicia, about like capital punishment and that sort of thing?
So my thoughts about capital punishment are, I'm going to go with with the little church answer. I think that a human life needs to be able to meet its natural conclusion. So philosophically, if we're against ending life, an innocent life.
That's the key point you brought up. Innocent.
I do understand that that's the key point, is it's innocent life. I do still think, though, that there is an inherent sanctity in life. I think that even if you are just a scum of the earth, you still need to met out the end of your natural life, and you have every opportunity that you can to repent. And your life doesn't have to be pleasant. I am all for, making the prisoners work. So like labor camps, penal colonies, I think we need to bring those back. My idea is for taking out the criminals of society is actually my little penal colony idea. So we've heard these about the 5-minute cities, right? Where you don't own a car, you don't own anything that can help you escape the 5-minute city. Everything's public transportation, everything's like right there where you need it. I think that's where we need to send people. If you don't want to cooperate with civilized society, you don't get to ruin everybody else's fun. You could go live in the world of your own making with all the other people that agree with you. It's just not going to be with everybody else. And you're not going to be able to leave it. It's going to be in a miserable place, like in the middle of a desert or somewhere where like you don't have a car, you can't escape, you can't do any of this. And so that's my idea, because I agree with you. The jails feeding all those people, it's expensive. It's a burden on society. And I think that if you are you only get to be a burden on society one way. You can make life hard for everybody else by being a criminal, or, and then you're locked up. But if you're locked up in jail and everybody's taxes are paying for you, you're a burden on society in two ways. So if you just send them to a penal colony, let them live their own life where they are responsible for their own food and decisions and everything else, then that's my little utopia idea, at least. Like, I know that it's not, when I can't I can't have it anymore, yeah. But I just want to send them away.
That I understand that sentiment. My counterpoint to that is, well, if you bring up a religion aspect of it, I don't think God got it wrong in the Old Testament. God prescribed the death penalty, so God is not opposed to the death penalty. He uses man as his instrument of righteousness, and not penalizing people and say, okay, we're smarter than God. God says we should execute criminals. We're smarter than that. That is hubris, and that ends up into a lot of issues. And yeah, life has value. I agree with that. But at the same time, that's between you and God, and make your peace. We don't have to tolerate your criminal actions. And I haven't seen the statistics, but I think once you execute someone, people that are executed, I don't think they repeat offend much anymore. I'll have to look at the data. I'm not sure, but that's my guess.
So
I'll ask AI on that. But and also, I don't want to pay for these people. And by the way, prisons as they are now, they're just schools for criminals. Once
mhm.
people get in there, they just get even more hardcore. I would rather have an environment, max 5 years you're in it. It's not a cruel place. We could try to work people out, try to get them on the right path. Again, and I think, by the way, once you get out of prison, you should have a clean slate. You shouldn't have this on your record. It shouldn't be against you like you're a felon or anything like that. You served your time. So in some ways, you could call me a bleeding heart. But if you're constantly committing crimes over and over, especially violent, serious crimes, that is your choice that you're not going to live among us in the proper way. We have no obligation to continue your life. And that's not really our decision. That's a decision you've made based on your actions. So if you value your life, which you should, then don't do these type of crimes. And we're not talking about, accidental crimes like you're texting and you run a red light, kill someone. That's a crime. But we're talking about serious, repeated offenders. I would be probably, I'll leave it up to the jury, but let's say if someone in the fit of anger kills someone, but if they had a history of no other problems and that they should have to pay restitution to the family, maybe serve some time in prison. But hey, if you can change your life around, I'm okay with that. But these animals that, 50, 100 times been arrested for stabbing people and they're put right back on the street. I have no toleration for those people.
I completely agree. And if I wasn't consistent with my particular religious beliefs, I believe that we should bring back public execution. I think there's a lot less crime when people were getting guillotined or hung or firing squad. And additionally, I like how Singapore does things. So they have what's called caning, and you can actually choose as a criminal between caning or jail time sometimes, or a fee or a fine. And right. It's a very interesting system, but it works. Singapore is one of the cleanest nations out there because of how severe all of their penalties are for not cooperating with society.
Yeah, and it's pretty quick punishment, and
Yep.
and that relates to a lot of people because some of these people, hey, they just go to prison, they see their homies play some basketball. That's not really, I mean, prison, yeah, it separates them from the rest of society. That's a good thing. But it shouldn't be this where they hang around other criminals. They should be in an environment where it tries to channel them in a good way. So I think in my ideal society, and based on, I probably have multiple shows I could have discussing my ideal society. I don't think there'd be a lot of crime. We could do a lot of things to prevent crime in the first place, have the right conditions, but you're always going to have some. And I think we could eliminate a lot of it. Hey,
well, that's why I think there should be labor camps. Honestly, sorry I interrupted.
No, that's fine.
I think labor camps would solve a lot of it, and it would take care of problems in society.
Yeah. Good point. Okay, let me just see here. I had Pam Hyde. Discrimination for any region should be legal for private individuals and businesses, housing, and employment. All right, this is a good question, and I will give you my opinion on this. I think I agree with you partially, and how I would do this if I was in my society. If you are a small business, say you have less than 100 employees, and you don't cross state lines, you should be able to discriminate however you wish. And I'm just thinking of one example. I actually met the guy in Colorado, Masterpiece Bakery. He's just a small guy he's a good Christian man. He has a little bakery shop on Wadsworth. If you guys are familiar with Colorado, you know where it is in Lakewood. And I met him, talked to him, and you know, he got in so much legal problem because he wanted to create some homosexual cake, and there's like hundreds of bakers in Colorado that would do it, but because of his religious beliefs, he took it to the Supreme Court, and that's just outrageous. You know, if you have a small business, you should be able to discriminate however you want. However, how I would change this is if you're in a large business, say a bank or even a big tech company or a phone service, I don't think you should be allowed to discriminate based on, let's say, someone's sex, race, or even their illegal political opinions. I think it's outrageous that a lot of dissidents have lost their bank accounts because of legal political opinions. I would make that illegal to do. So once you get to a certain size, I think companies should have to not discriminate. Now, that doesn't mean I'm for DEI, which is a form of discrimination. That's I would not allow that. But that's how I would do that.
So I have a question for you on
Sure.
that. If large companies are allowed to discriminate and we allow that, say that's okay, would it then spur other companies then to crop up that say like, hey, so like say somebody's like discriminating against Christians, you know, we're not going to give you cell service if you're a Christian or whatever.
Right.
Wouldn't that then maybe encourage another company to pop up and say like, hey, like, well, we'll take the Christian's business, and then now they have this huge base.
That could, and I think that works better in theory with smaller companies like a little bakeries or like laundry stores. I mean, I'm really hardcore. I think if you have a restaurant or if, say, you have a small shop and you say, I don't want blacks in my shop, you should be allowed to refuse service. I really do believe that, or whites or whoever, because it's your private property. You have a right to make this determination. But the problem is when you get to large corporations, just the scale of them, you don't have that many options. And the idea of, well, if you don't like a phone service or a bank, just make your own bank or make your own phone company. It's not that easy to do. And so I understand for big, large corporations that are quasi monopolies, or maybe there's one or two competitors. I don't think like T-Mobile or AT&T should be able to say, Ramsey Paul, we're not going to give you service because we disagree with your politics, or we disagree that you're a Christian, or someone else, we're not going to give you service because you're black. I don't think they should do that. However, if you have a little coffee shop and you have, hey, we don't want Republicans in here, that should be your right to do so. Okay, Rawhouse, $2. Wait, Ramsey, is Larry Finca is admitting this all along? Let me just see what Rawhouse brought on here. I think this has to do with immigration, so let's take a look here. We got another, we got a generous super chat, so I'm catching all these. But like Alicia said, it's fun to get you guys' opinion here. So let's take a look.
You know,
here.
we always used to think shrinking population is a cause for negative growth.
Sorry, guys. Let's try this again here.
You know, we always used to think shrinking population is a cause for negative growth. But in my conversations with the leadership of these large developed countries that have xenophobic immigration policies, they don't allow anybody to come in, shrinking unemployment, shrinking demographics, these countries will rapidly develop robotics and AI and technology. And if the promise, I didn't say it's going to happen, but if the promise of all that transform productivity, most of us think it will, we'll be able to elevate the standard of living of countries and the standard of living of individuals, even with shrinking populations. And so the paradigm of negative population growth is going to be changing. And the social problems that one will have in substituting humans for machines is going to be far easier in those countries that have declining populations. You know, we always use the...
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Thank you for bringing that up. And that was Row House, by the way. And thank you for that. Let me just put that down here as a rant. Uh, One of the issues, Andrew Yang brought this up, and this is a potential problem, but we could do a whole show on this. But in the current system of capitalism, how it works is most people, they sell their labor. But the question becomes is what if people that own the capital, they no longer need labor? And I know that's just hypothetical, but just think if you had a hypothetical world where robots could do everything a human could do, so you don't need waitresses, you don't need cooks, you don't need bus drivers, you don't need anyone to really do the work, robots can do it, then how do people live? How do they make their money? How do, are they just supposed to starve? I don't think that, of course, this is an extreme view. I don't think it's ever going to get to exactly to that point, but we're already seeing issues. Facebook, they're laying off a lot of programmers because AI can do the programming now. So I think as we go forward, I don't think we ever have a problem. We don't have enough people for jobs, and this gets into the whole H-1B debate. We have plenty of people that can't get jobs, and I think there's going to be fewer jobs just because of technology. I would like to see, I know Andrew Yang talked about a guaranteed income. I want to do a guaranteed income in that sense. I would like to see everyone, once they reach 18, they have to have some form of national service. I could get into that some more, but you just serve a couple years and then maybe every year you do a little bit, but you get guaranteed income in that sense. Because we as humanity, we're going to run into this problem. What happens when there's not enough work because people have been automated out of jobs? And this is a hypothetical. It's already happening. I feel sorry for like graphic artists, right? Like the thumbnail I used for our show here, that was just AI did it. I didn't have to pay a graphic artist. So this is already happening. What's your thoughts on this, Alicia? It's kind of a complicated issue, or how to deal with this of technology replacing people and not having, how do people live if they can't sell their labor?
Exactly. And I unfortunately don't know the answer to that. I know that one of the issues that we've seen when women entered the workforce is that, we saw a little, it economically eventually was a detriment. And I think that we would see the same thing with AI. The other thing to consider is that humans need human interaction. And the population growth, there's 3 different graphs, but the main 2 are either inverted triangle or pyramid. And you either have a few old people and then you have a large base of young people to support them, or you have a lot of old people and then like only a limited amount of young people to support them. And many countries are finding themselves in this right now. And yeah, robots eventually can take care of the old people, especially if population continues to decline. That's what's going to happen. But from a social standpoint, the longest lived people tend to be the happiest people. And the happiest people tend to be the people with the best social relationships. And eventually, what I believe we would start seeing if AI and robots take over is health consequences. We would see less old people, less people reaching these ages because they don't have those relationships to sustain themselves anymore. They don't have the reason to live. The ikigai is called in Japan. And I think that is very troubling, especially considering the fact that so much of our money already goes towards healthcare and curing disease states. I think we would be creating more disease.
Yeah, and getting to the point, I don't think we need to import people because, oh, we're not producing enough children, we need to import more people elsewhere. I think that is a mistake to do that. And the question becomes is how many more people do you need in a society? Japan, you've been there, it's a very crowded island. Would it be devastating if they went back to the population of 1970? I
No,
mean,
I
it's
don't
still
think so.
crowded. So I don't know if you need petrol growth than anything, because eventually you run out of resources. I think you need to find the proper balance and I think it's sort of self-regulating. It will happen. Um, it's, I know the idea, we almost have a Ponzi scheme. You need all these kids to support the old people and Social Security and all that. And if you don't have enough kids, how do you support it? But then we also have this other element coming in of technology replacing a lot of the need for labor. And I know when I bring this up, people always say, "Oh, you're like a Luddites." And Luddites, for people watching, were people, I believe, in the 18th century that were scared that all these labor saving devices would make it so people wouldn't have work. And it didn't really happen. It sort of happened. There's fewer farmers or farm hands because you had tractors and all that, but they went in the cities, and then you started to have the industrial revolution, and you had jobs in the factory. But if those are going, and those are all being automated now, where are people supposed to go? It used to be learn to code, but that doesn't make sense anymore. That's being replaced. So I think we're coming up to a huge issue here that I haven't heard many people, definitely not many politicians, address how to deal with it. Bobby Tate, thank you. Generous donation. I have no problem with capital punishment in theory, only in execution. I think it was Rodney Dangerfield gag. I don't get no respect. Yeah.
I don't get no respect.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That was a good one. So yeah, we've already touched on some good topics here. And we talked about the criminal justice system a little bit. All right, foreign policy. I hate the term isolationist. I think that's a smear. I don't believe any country that we should be isolated from other countries, but I don't think we should be in their business. And part of the problem that the United States has is we've evangelism, not with Christianity anymore, but with our wokeness. So we have a problem, let's say in Afghanistan, if they don't educate their women. Well, that's for Afghanistan to deal with. We don't need troops there to try to enforce that. And I know that was one of the drivers for having troops in Afghanistan. We can't fix the entire world, nor should we try. Our military should be to defend our country, not other countries. And our policy with government should be, we may not agree with you, but if you can be friendly with us, we'll be friendly with you. So we're not searching out to have these endless wars and conflicts, but we are focused on America first. I think it's outrageous how we get so caught up in like the Israeli lobby focusing on Israel or focusing on Ukraine. We got to get out of that. If I was king, we would focus on America. It doesn't mean we don't trade with other countries or we don't visit other countries, but we got to get out of this imperial mindset that we have to try to enforce our values on all these other countries.
I agree. It absolutely, sorry, I'm going to clear my throat real quick.
Oh, that's fine.
But no, it absolutely enrages me how much money we have sent to Ukraine instead of spending it on our own people. I can't, it's completely backwards. It's money laundering, and it needs to change. And I agree with you. If I were Empress, we wouldn't be doing that anymore. We would take all of that time, all of that energy, invest it in our own people.
Yeah, I agree with that. And unfortunately, the powerful lobbies get in the way and they buy politicians. And that brings me to my next thing, the type of government. And I'm not a huge fan of democracy. I know that's considered outrageous, but the founding fathers actually agreed with me that we were always taught America was not a democracy, it was a republic. And they were worried about democracy because Greece, they without exception, whenever you have a democracy, unless you have controls around it, it ends up into tyranny because people just loot the system, and we're starting to see that now. I would have a very limited democracy where you'd have like the House of Representatives and only certain people could vote. Then you'd have the Senate, and they're more appointed for life. And then I wouldn't have like I wouldn't mind having like a king, but not like just total control where they can behead people, more like a constitutional monarchy. I don't know if it'd even be king because they would have to have the will of the people and they could be voted out. But the problem is, and also for elections, when you go to the House of Representatives in my system, there wouldn't be political parties. You couldn't get campaign money. You would just represent your district. Maybe 3 or 4 people are running. You would go up, you put your policies out a few weeks before the elections. Maybe you'd have a town hall and a debate. That's it. You shouldn't need millions of dollars. And it would be illegal to get all these money from like the Israeli lobby or for the military industrial complex. Because the problem now we have in a democracy is our politicians tend to be whores. Except they're even worse than whores because you don't get anything in return. They're up to the highest bidder and they don't really care about their constituents. So I think we need a fundamental change in how we structure our government. And that's just kind of the surface of how I would change it. What are your thoughts about the form of government, Alicia?
So if I had my way, and if this were like a utopia of my dreams, we'd have a theocracy. But that's not the world we live in, so I can't have that. But no, I agree with you. Did you say that you would have the Senate appointed for life?
Yeah, how I would do it. First of all, in my system, there'd be 3 branches of government. Uh, it, in And by the way, the whole 3 branches of government in some ways came from Rome, right? That was kind of how it started. You had the senators. The senators weren't voted on; they were the patricians, and then you had the plebes, and they had their assembly, and then you had the consul that was elected, but then it became the emperor. But how I would do this is once you went through your service at the age of 18 or 20, you would become a citizen, and then you could vote. Just you would vote just for your so you'd send a representative into like Congress, and then the Congress they would actually elect the president, kind of similar to the parliamentary system like some countries do, but the president really would be more like the in a sense like a king, like a monarch, but he'd still report to them. They could still recall him. But then the king would have the ability, based on the approval, to appoint people to the Senate, and they would be appointed to life. And they, as part of being the Senate, you get a nice salary and everything, but you couldn't work in the public private sector. You would be dedicated to the country, because the problem we have is people in our system, they just look to the short term. They don't have any incentive, the politicians, to look to the long-term health of the country. So we need to change the dynamics there. So that's how, on just a very level, I would change that quite a bit.
Interesting. So what would you do when we've seen, was it Feinstein that was in the nursing home? Who was that?
Oh, yeah, one of those. Well, there would be a way to remove it, and there'd be checks and balances. So senators could be impeached and removed, and I would have probably a cutoff age for age that you would retire. So there'd be a way to remove people. So there would be checks and balances within this system.
That's really interesting. I would like to hear more about that. I agree with you.
I've thought a lot about it. I should write it out because it's too complex to talk about this in this. I could talk about the whole government system in like 3 hours. Maybe one day I'll do that or write it out. But this is what, you know, that meme, you know, when the guy's just thinking, the girl's like, oh, I wonder who he's thinking of, some girl. And instead I'm thinking of my government system. I really do that.
Restructure the government.
I know Sasha just laughs at me because she goes, what do you think about before you go to sleep? And I'm like, usually about like Mars or something. So it's like, I'm really guy.
Yeah. So thoughts on what you said, because that's not a subject that I've thought too much on personally. I don't lie awake at night thinking of about a restructured government. But what I do know is, first of all, like you said, democracy, that's not how our country started, as republic. And we also know that, from Afghanistan, as we brought up earlier, democracy is not for everybody. It doesn't work for everyone. And what we have seen that has stood the test of time is a republic. And as you said, that dates back to Rome. And that's where much of our culture actually comes from today. And I think, tied all together, I think that's one of the reasons why we have so much societal problems as a country lately, is because our culture, it started with, the Greco-Roman society, and then Christianity got added in, and then it swept up the European peninsula. And then, we took over all of those tribes, and the culture, that's how our culture was created. And we have come to agreement over thousands of years on a set of rules and morality and how to conduct ourselves. And then very recently, we've added all these people that have not evolved as a culture the same way. And so, like you were saying earlier, they don't see the world the same way that we do. And I think that's been a real issue. And so I agree. Maybe restructuring. Maybe it all starts with restructuring our government. Maybe we could save society.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you wanted a pure democracy without any control, and people argue, oh, we got to have democracy, everything else is immoral. And if you really believe that, then with no controls, then you would say it's okay if 51% of the people vote to execute 49% of the minority, that would be okay, right? Because that's a vote, right? Let's all vote. We're going to execute you. Well, we voted. That's what we come up with. And a democracy or mob rule is not a good form of government. It really isn't. You need controls over it.
So let's talk about that real quick. Yeah, not everybody should vote. I'm talking about like men and women. And I think that we need more. I think we need rules on who can vote. I don't think everybody should be voting. If you're uneducated, there's several founding fathers that felt the same way. And vote, that's the bottom rule. Voting is not for everybody. If you don't have enough of a stake in this country, if you haven't contributed enough, I think you mentioned, military service.
Or some sort of national service. Yeah, I would do that. And so I wouldn't even put pressure on that. If and I'm borrowing this idea. Robert Heinlein had this in Starship Troopers. They had the idea of the difference between a legal resident and a citizen. And they basically had the same rights, but only citizens could vote. And those were people that actually gave national service to some degree. I don't mean you have to spend your whole life in the army or something, but you're giving back because you need to have some duty. So you give to the country, you should be able to get something back. It shouldn't just be one way where the people, like, they come in this country and they just want to give all this free healthcare, free education. That's not how it should work. It should be give back too. And
Israel has that as well. I also think that families should get more votes with like how many children you have and stuff. I think that if you're contributing to the country that way, I also think that your vote should count for more.
Well, what I thought,
we'd have to find a way to like filter out the people that just
well, yeah, you'd have to have reasons. It like you'd have to have it like families with a father, not just some woman that gets pregnant with all these different baby daddies pushing out babies that are on welfare. She should not get more votes.
No. I'm talking about a mom and a dad that are stable, can prove that they maybe they have to meet an income goal. I don't know, but a mom in a nuclear family that is perhaps a certain economic class, I think that they should get extra votes, because if we're going to get serious about what the backbone of society is, it is families. And I think that the U.S., if they want to solve our future population crisis, that they need to be more serious about addressing that.
We got a super chat. Bush era Mideast wars damaged the Republican Party. Very much so. And I think a lot of people, both on the left and the right, Republicans and Democrats, are very tired of our policy of getting involved with all these other countries. And we'll see what Trump will do. I mean, it sounds like they developed a peace deal in Gaza. That's good. Hopefully, he'll follow through on his word, and we will end the war in Ukraine. I'm not a real pro-war type of guy. Now, I'm not against the military, and I'm not against wars for defending our people, but we shouldn't fight these proxy wars. And definitely that is the case. Let's see here. Some other hot topics. Healthcare. How do you think that should be handled? I'll let you go.
Yeah,
for it.
so I can go off on healthcare. I know so much about healthcare. I go autistic for healthcare. So the whole system needs to be changed. Our medical studies are funded by big pharma. So, they discover like, oh, this drug is effective against this disease. And well, look who funded the study. It's the company that owns the drug. Surprise, surprise. That's what we recently went through with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. That's what it is. But for years and years and years, they were like, oh, we don't really know the cause. We just know that this concoction that we've come up with can help people with Alzheimer's. Other than that, there's not really a cure. Well, yes, there is. It's metabolic health. It's preventative medicine. But that's not what our medical system rotates around. Our medical system is reactionary. It's drugs. It's not focused on preventing disease at all. And so you get what you subsidize, and we have a bunch of sick people because that's how the people in power that are running the whole system make their money. So with vaccines, you can be on the board that votes vaccines into the childhood vaccine schedule. You can, so I'm left out the key part. The person that owns the vaccine can be on the board that votes the vaccine into the childhood vaccine schedule. That's one of the reasons that the vaccine that supposedly prevents serious diarrhea, I forget the name of it, but that's literally all it does. It prevents diarrhea. But the guy that owns that vaccine got to vote on it being added to the schedule, a completely useless vaccine. And now I think the doses, since the Childhood Vaccine Act of 1984, they went from 16 vaccines that you would receive before 1984, and now I think we have over 100.
Yeah, they've really exploded. That is definitely the case. I get that preventative healthcare to a degree, but the problem is you're just pushing off what will happen anyway. It was I was told a couple of years ago, I went to my family doctor just for a checkup. We were just talking. I'm not a smoker, but I said, it is kind of a trade-off because the people that smoked, they kept their weight down. Now they're getting fat. And he goes, you're really right. And I'm not advocating smoking, but let's say even if you do everything right, eventually you're sick and die, and it's going to be, you're going to have some medical bills with that. There's really no contract with life. I mean, you can do everything right and you can still get cancer. There's no.
Well, so you can do everything right and still get cancer, but you can do everything right and significantly reduce your chances compared to your cohorts of getting cancer. Like that's the whole point, is that we don't have, I think the average American, and I forget the age that this starts, but the average American is on 6 prescription medications. There's no need for that. And the majority of women are on SSRIs. There's no reason for that. And it's...
I 100% agree. On the counterpoint, besides the good old days, people didn't live as long in the good old days either. People live longer now. Now it's starting to reduce a little bit. But it was, before you had these drugs, if you got an infection, well, you're tough shit. You're probably, there's a good chance you're going to die. And childbirth was a very dangerous thing. It used to be very dangerous. Yeah. And a lot of women died in childbirth. Now it's fairly rare, but it happens, but it's fairly rare. So medicine has increased our lifespans, or it hasn't increased how people live. Like John Adams lived to be in his 90s. You're more likely to live longer now than you were back then, but the human lifespan is still the same. It hasn't really changed. And
but those are
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but like those are acute conditions that you're discussing. Those aren't chronic ones. The majority of the health issues that the US has are chronic conditions, which we are able to prevent them. And that's my thing is like, we're not, like you said, we're not dying from acute conditions anymore because the US is very good. We have amazing emergency medicine. And but in terms of chronic health conditions.
Well, you know what the biggest problem, what the biggest cause of cancer is? Age. And so if you want to reduce cancer rates, have people die earlier from other stuff, and the cancer rate will go down. Because the problem with cancer is just your cells replicate normally, but as you get older, that just starts to break down because it's a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's with animals and everything, not just humans. It happens. Age is the number one criteria for that. So, yeah, you can do things to maybe get you older, but eventually it's going to break down. That's how the human body works. And then you have to treat those people. So you're kind of deferring it. And I would say let's say you keep everyone alive. We're going to ban smoking, let's say. Not that I advocate that. Well, those people, they may live longer, but they're going to develop something else then. And, eventually it all happens. It's rare. Everyone wants to think you live real healthy until you're 100 years old and you just drop dead, riding a bicycle. That's not typically how aging works. That's a nice fantasy that makes us feel good, but that's not typically it happens. Especially when you hit age around 80, you start to really deteriorate. I don't care if you eat well or exercise. It makes us feel better that that's going to keep us young, but it's not the case. The age is a real thing. It's not a state of mind. And we have to determine how we're going to deal with people that are sick and how do we fund that. And that has become, I think, a huge issue.
So, okay, I'm going to address that last point, but I want to go back to the cancer thing. The thing that I would challenge that with is, do you know the age group that has the fastest growing rate of cancer right now?
No. What would that be?
1-year-olds. So there is a high correlation for cancer and environmental toxins being diet to things, what you wash your clothes in. And what we've seen also is this massive uptick in microplastics. Microplastics are also an environmental toxin. And so I completely agree. Age is a risk factor for cancer. That's not debatable. It's a fact. But I think that the rates that we are seeing cancer in our population can be significantly reduced. And I don't think cancer is the leading cause of death right now in the US anyway. I think it's cardiovascular disease. I think.
Ryan, preventative medicine is the wave of the future. Thank you, Ryan, for that. And let's see here. I want to make sure because we're gonna wrap up at an hour. Alicia's kind enough to be on tonight. I know. Thank you, Alicia. I know you've been struggling with a cold or whatever.
Yeah.
And ironically, we're talking about health here.
I know, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a, yeah, man, it's just fast. It's so funny. We had like all these bullet points and we can hardly talk. Each one of these bullet points could be a whole show because it's so deep you can go into it.
Yeah.
But it was kind of fun going over some of these topics. And let me just see. So we're going to keep it to an hour tonight, guys. We have a kind of a hard deadline. So just want to make sure I got everything. I didn't miss any super chats or everything. I think I got everything. So thank you guys all that have donated. Yeah, any other, I guess my final point I would like to make on this conversation, which I think is extremely interesting, and again, it could go on for hours, is I think I would love to see us as a people, right? Not just Democrats, but as a whole people, have more of these high-level discussions about big concepts. Too often we get down in the weeds on little, you got to get in the weeds about the capital gains tax rate. And I'm not saying that's not important, but sometimes you got to step back and take a look like, well, wait a minute, are we really approaching it this the right way from a big point of view? The big questions of employment and technology, healthcare, as you said, and the whole economy, how we structure the government. And in general, there's not many people that do that, especially politicians. They're just always promising lower taxes or spending more money on some program. So I do think this is valuable and it needs to be done more, I think.
I agree. I think that this is where change starts to happen. I think the it's a chicken or egg, the government influences society, or does society influence government? I think it's both. And I think that discussions like this are where that process begins.
Yeah, I think so, very much so. So I won't keep you any longer, Alicia, so you can get get feeling better. But God, thank you so much for being on tonight, and thank you guys all for being here. And Alicia, I wanted to shout out your microphone sounds really good. I think you guys agree.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
it's so the last couple of times, the last time it sounded like a little bit underwater, but man, it's 100% better. So thank you for the headphones, and that really makes an improvement.
Yes, I appreciate all of the feedback that I get. And so, yeah, I wanted to treat all to some better sounds because I've seen that. So thank y'all.
Yeah, no, and we're still, and if you guys have ideas of how we want to, what you'd like to see in the show, we're open to it. Like I said, I don't know if I just want to do a new show because I do that on Mondays and Fridays, but it's kind of interesting to talk about various subjects. So give us your opinion, what you like to see, and we can definitely structure the show that way. Alicia, hope you feel better, and thank you so much for being here tonight. And thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next week. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.